Sure, and just a 10-second intro. I'm doing solar cooking videos with people that are doing unique new cookers that are out there. Like you've got something that's kind of up and coming. A lot of people are starting to look at it, and even they might even have skeptical questions. The purpose of my videos are just to say, look, here's an option. It works. What are all the details? How can people maybe tap into it? And your number of 3 out of 38 in a whirlwind tour of the Southwest United States. Anyway, so I'm here to learn about what you're doing, where you're doing it, how you came up with the idea, and so forth. So start as far back as you'd like. It'd be great to hear your story.
Well, first, just some information about me personally. Which part I play in the company is I'm the digital manager. So I joined the company in early 2020. So I've been there for 1.5 years now. And the whole thing started out with my my current 2 bosses, who were part of a group of engineers in university, who came up with the idea that there should be a solution for people in areas without access to electricity to have the possibility to cook in a sustainable and healthy manner without polluting the environment and without suffering from disease because of all those pollutants from burning firewood, biomass, charcoal, whatever, because that is primarily the way people cook in sub-Saharan Africa, in those refugee camps where we mainly operate. So in 2017, PV-to was founded. Back then there were 3 founders, and as business goes along, as companies develop, some people joined, like me, other people left. So right now we are 7, if I'm not mistaken, and our CEO and CTO are the 2 engineers that met each other in university, and they developed the ECOCA solar cookstoves. And what that is pretty much a whole home cooking unit powered by a single solar panel, which means that each family who receives the device itself, which is a cooking cabinet with a battery pack and 2 USB outlets, together with a solar panel, 2 insulated pots, and 2 light sources, a torch and a lamp. So what this means is that they can not only use the ECOCA for cooking, but for lighting their homes at night, also when they're preparing meals at night, or when kids need to study, or yeah, you name it, all the above, as well as charge other devices. Because of those USB outlets, people can charge their phones now from home, which normally also is a different kind of business, and costs people money to do so in the refugee camps. So already here you can see we're talking about a lot of energy, money, and resource saving. But back to the development, we started with pilot projects in different countries, Uganda, Burundi, and back then also Myanmar. And at the current state, we operate mostly in and from Uganda. As Stan mentioned earlier, a lot of our pilot studies and our first assembly point are located in Bidi refugee camp in Yumba district, northern Uganda, where we also had the pleasure of meeting some of our beneficiaries this year when we were on the trip. So we could meet the people who actually cook with our units now, which you can read all about on our website as well, because we made a whole folder called the Impact Stories, where we interview people about their experiences. And what we heard so far is very, very good response, and actually very high interest. Like the demand for such facilities is very, very much there. And as Stan also mentioned earlier, we are totally looking into other spaces, both geographically as well as customer-wise, to expand to other countries, to more beneficiaries, and also seeking to head out into the B2C market, or like direct consumers, also to sell it in urban areas. Just because this product is not only, yes, of course, it is super valuable and very much made to be used in rural areas without access to electricity. Nevertheless, you can also use it in any other area of the world just with enough sunlight, just because it's a super sustainable and healthy way to cook and to receive energy.
Sure.
And obviously in sub-Saharan Africa, the climate circumstances make it possible to have a solar powered home unit fully charged and ready to use at all times, just because.
Sarah, this is Jill. You can't see me. How did the people, are you funded? How is this funded? Is the government of Uganda paying for these?
Oh yeah, good question. As for now, we're mostly funded through NGOs, meaning that NGOs, for example, CARE or Caritas, big partners of ours, we have joined projects like BDBD refugee camp, community kitchens together with CARE, where they buy the stoves pretty much. Other than that, we have some projects going on where we can sell our product at a subsidized price through NGOs. But yeah, that is how the financial part works at the moment. We hope to do so soon to sell to people directly, as we're developing both the assembly and sales in Uganda. We have staff and resources at hand now. That is developing right now.
Okay. And is the stove being mostly used with charcoal or wood?
This stove does not require any form of biomass or fossil fuel. It's electrical and fully fueled by the solar panel. Perfect. This is actually one of our beneficiaries of the cover page who's cooking with our device. So here you can already see what it looks like. Solar panel, one of the pots, and the unit itself. I'm just taking you through our brochure pretty much to showcase what it looks like. So we have kind of this setup for each household that buys in ECOCA. Here you see the panel. This green cabinet is where the magic happens. So in there we have the battery pack and all the chips, the computer stuff, let's call it that. And there are the two USB outlets as well. We have 3 different functions, 3 different cooking modes for whatever dish you want to prepare. So we had some pilot studies on cooking needs and ingredients that are used in the areas that we're mostly supplying at the moment. And it turned out that these 3 cooking modes are most suitable for the cooking needs and the kind of ingredients, such as a specific kind of bean or posho or rice that people mostly cook.
Remind me, the cooking element, this is an induction cooker?
Yeah, we have so on the bottom of this pot, there's let's call it a hole or like a connection point, which is perfectly fits to another connection point in the middle of the cabinet. So there's only this specific pot that goes on there and connects the stove with the pot itself, which also means that only the pot is heating up. There's no heat outside the pot, which makes it very safe to use around children as well, because that is another pain point that we are solving with this, is that for former cooking ways of cooking with fossil fuels or with open fire, obviously that's extremely dangerous if you have kids and running around while you're making food. As they can get burned or can get injury. So that doesn't happen here, just because only the contents of the pot inside are getting hot, whereas you can still touch the cabinet while you're making food. The temperature is normal. And with each purchase, you will get 2 of those pots, which we also figured that one pot, we got the feedback that one pot is just not enough for an entire family, because you want to prepare different dishes or different components of a dish at the same time, or they need to be stored simultaneously. And then what you see here is the lamp. And this is the torch, which is super handy because sometimes people have to either want to light their home at night, or the torch if you have to walk a distance at night, because as you can imagine, there are no such things as street lights or other lighting devices on the way around these refugee camps or around the people's homes. So how does it work? As I said earlier, the sun powers the entire cooking unit, which means people so far decide to set the panel out in the morning and take it into their home at night, just for safety reasons, so it doesn't break or get stolen or anything. But you pretty much just set it out in the direct sunlight. It doesn't even have to be extremely sunny, but you know, just light, which then charges the battery pack in the cooking unit and lasts long enough to cook 3 meals per day for an entire family. And yeah, the benefits I touched upon this, like the CO2 reduction, I guess it's obvious. There's no such thing as pollutants or smoke or anything released from the stove itself into the air, which we calculated to be around 5 tons of CO2 reduced per year. And that does obviously also save a lot of wood fuel. And this is actually a very big point. Like not only the amount of wood or fossil fuels or resources to burn that is safe, but also the way that it's normally sourced, because for wood fuel, especially women have to walk miles and miles each day to gather the wood from very, very far distances, just because in the refugee camps, they are very, very large. Like I don't know if you have seen pictures of what it looks like, but you have to walk really, really far to reach the first tree that actually has wood that is possible to burn. So that takes a lot of time. It's very hard, and it's also dangerous just because women risk assaults and rape on the way. Just that's the dangers they're facing each day just to supply the family with firewood for cooking at night. This ties along with the access to education, because especially women, and that means also girls, are have the task of cooking or gathering wood for doing so. That means they can't attend school most of the times. But by using the ECOCA, nobody needs to collect firewood, nobody needs to walk these distances, spend the time, so they can attend school instead, which is very, very good.
Sarah, just listening to some podcasts this week, the Kakuma refugee camp in northern Kenya, 200,000 people. It's been there since 1992. The UN has to supply 1,250 metric tons of wood per year.
Yeah, imagine that amount of wood.
Amazing.
And if you think about supplying those people with, or those families with ECOCAs instead, or like even half, or even just a few, how much wood that could already save.
Yeah. It's hard for us in the United States to understand that there are areas of the world that there is not one tree, no blade of grass, no out.
Yeah.
And
maybe you can tell from this picture in our brochure, but you see everything you see in the back of the picture here, those are huts, those are family homes. And the trees around there, if there are any, as you see here, is pretty much desert road. If there are any, this is not wood that serves the purpose of, like, if you burn this, it will be gone in a second. You know, it's not possible to use this as wood fuel for cooking or for having a fire lit the entire night. So maybe this gives you an overview. Like, this is also only just a snippet of the size of the refugee camp. Like, we're talking about areas that are larger than that I could imagine before I saw it with my own eyes for the first time.
yeah, how many people are in Bitty Bitty? Do you know?
I actually don't know the exact number of entire Bitty Bitty, but I know that the districts where we are operating, we're talking about 50,000.
Yeah.
The first picture you see here, I took this one in Uganda this year. That was when we went out to an installation at the camp, and this is one of our staff from the assembly point right next to the entrance to the refugee camp, and he's showing the different cooking modes to the woman who just received her with ECOCA. And that was actually also very exciting to see, because with each installation, like, more and more people gathered around, like, it was a real event happening. and the response or the feedback that we got was like super high interest. Like all people who saw what was happening at that day, they were like, oh, we would really like to have one as well. Like, this seems genius. That would make a lot of things much easier. And there you see Simon programming one of the stoves and checking the data, because we also obviously we collect the cooking data. We want to know how people I mean, anonymously obviously, but just from the stoves themselves, how are they used, like timestamps and everything, just so we can further develop the technology and the software behind it to make it even more suitable for cooking meats, and to see like how are batteries lasting and all those things.
The pot, you mentioned the pot, is it any induction capable pot that can be used there, or is yours?
No, it's a specific pot that corresponds with the unit. So there's only this one spot, one pot, just because the induction or like the connecting point only fits with this one pot. It's like, you know, your kettle from home, your tea kettle,
Sure.
Electric one.
Okay.
It works kind of the same way.
And but it also has USB ports where you don't have to have
Exactly.
on there to be able to charge stuff for lights or the battery and so forth.
Sorry, come again?
You don't need to have the pot. You only need to have the pot on for cooking. Otherwise,
Yeah.
connecting to get everything else. Great. Yeah.
Exactly. You could still charge your phone without a pot on it. It's like, yeah.
Sure.
So the solar panel looks is it like 2 feet, 3 millimeters long?
It is. Let me find a picture we have.
If you
So
go
you can see in comparison.
2.5
There
feet.
you see one.
So it's put right on top of their hut, each hut then?
Yeah, you could. Like, some people decide to put it on, to mount it on top of the hut. Others decide to store it inside their homes and take, like, at night, and take it out in the morning and just put it on the ground.
Oh,
There it is.
go back
Okay,
Did you
to,
see it?
So what you're saying, it just depends. There's no no definite rule what you do. It's up to you.
No, there's a definite rule. You can decide it on your own. But the only important thing is that the you know, there's sunlight and it reaches sunlight. Yeah, it is a standard size solar panel.
if you have a solar panel like I have on top of my roof, it's the exact same dimension. It's like that wide and about 5.7 feet long. Slow down
It's
right
definitely, yeah.
there to show they actually have created a assembly area right in the refugee camp. So
Yeah.
Simon,
Yeah, this is the local PO.
it's a good example where they employ the local people in the actual assembly, training, and work on the distribution and you know, any follow-up work that's needed.
Exactly, and it already, like, it is developing so fast. It already looks much different now than it did back then when I took this photo in May.
Yeah.
So since then, a lot more stuff has been assembled right there.
So do you provide the opportunity if like individuals want to donate a full kit to somebody in a refugee camp?
So we had a crowdfunding campaign earlier this year where it was possible to, on a rewards-based donation, supply a family with a stove. But we cannot, obviously you could buy one, yes, but we are not able to receive donations since we're not a nonprofit.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it. Okay.
But of course, a product can be bought by anybody and like installed at any geographic spot. That doesn't really matter.
One of the other unique features of the ECOCA is that it actually has a data logger in it.
Yes.
Where you can actually monitor the length of time that the stove is actually being used, which is
exactly. And that was the database I mentioned earlier. There was a database created actually by some students from the Danish universities or in collaboration with them. Yes, as you say, in order to monitor how it is used, and then further out of that get some insights into what our cooking needs, what are needs for electricity, and how much can we supply with our product.
The data is critical. I just got off a conference call a little bit ago where the carbon credit market is going to be much more demanding of actual physical data showing how many hours the stove has been used, whether it's a biomass stove or a solar cooker. Because when you're paying out or buying carbon credits for so many tons of CO2 saved, you need a very hard record to show what you're paying for. And that's very important for investors in this entire segment, that they have that data. So the data logging is critical.
Well, and that's fantastic. Yeah. If I can just say, a little bit of applause here, because so many of the folks I've talked to where they've been part of a project where they've distributed hundreds or thousands of the general solar thermal box or panel cookers. And I always ask, how do you know that they're still using them? And very few of them have the means to go back and check. And the ones that do are usually severely disappointed. They might have distributed 100 cookers to one village, and maybe 2 or 3 families maybe are still using them. They've repurposed them for mirrors for their homes. Some box cookers, they'll gut them and they'll use it for a wash basin, and the really crestfallen reaction when they find that out. So you're being able to do this is just fantastic, because it's like down to the second. I mean, really, you can do it down to the second if you wanted. And
of course, first of all that, and then again, as I mentioned earlier, through the possibility, through traveling down there, meeting up with our beneficiaries, getting their feedback on their usage. Like, we talked to people who were the first people to receive a stove, or to hear their experiences. And that doesn't mean we just want to hear like, oh, this is so great and so easy, but also issues. What can we do better? What has been a problem? And that is, for example, the fact that that not everybody feels safe to mount a solar panel or leave it outside, right? Because there are safety aspects with that. Or that people say, the fact that people get 2 pots, that is an insight we didn't get from anywhere, an idea that didn't come from anywhere, but talking to people, getting qualitative data on how is our product actually used by the people it's meant for. And if you ask my boss, he has a funny story about eating kosher or this beans for ages, just to figure out what the perfect software is that can heat up this specific type of bean so that it matches the cooking needs, or the way that it's supposed to be cooked through for a family, for a normal family in Uganda, so they can have their food, not just anything, but the dishes they prefer to eat, right? And all those insights, they don't come from, just selling and never seeing a product again, but from going back, hearing feedback and monitoring how is it used.
That's a good story. That's I have one of my videos is with a guy who distills stuff with solar energy, and he says, I hate beer, but I drink it for science, because he uses the beer bottle.
Yeah.
Distilling. So he made a great sacrifice, continually cooking.
Yeah, that is.
But
that is a great sacrifice. I wish the ECOCA was used for something else, or like we didn't test on beans and rice. It could be.
So you have the data, you have the ability to log data for every single stove that you sell then?
Technically, there is the possibility to track each one through the software. With the qualitative data and interviews, we obviously don't have that on everybody. Also, just because it's not easy to reach everyone in like such an environment.
Okay.
But when we went down there, we asked for, because our staff down there are very well connected to the beneficiaries. Like, they have like almost like they know each other by name. Like, hey, how's it going? How's your ECOCA working? And so that's more on a voluntary basis. Obviously, nobody needs to talk to us if they don't want to. But some of the people were really open. They were like, I would like to share my experience. I would like to tell how cooking and just living was improved by having the possibility to use the ECOCA instead of biomass for cooking.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks.
I just visited Pete Schwartz in Poli-Sci, where they're doing the retained heat cookers, with or not retained, phase change materials. And he's got a whole class at his disposal of students that can experiment with sugars or salts and so forth. And the one question I always have is, you have to have crunched the numbers, right, as to who could afford this. So, you know, what's their monthly income and how many months before payment plan what kind of a finance plan do people need, if any, to take these on, or are they primarily being donated right now, or what's the situation?
So there are payment plans which people can choose, which is 2-year or 3-year at this point. And obviously this all depends or is specified to the current stage. So we are working on assembling, having a local assembly. We're working on making the product cheaper, of course, but since we're a startup, it is hard to source all the different components, get them from like mostly, or like for now, also from China, and ship them and assemble them in Uganda. But what we are looking to do is source right from Uganda. Like when we went on our trip, and maybe we had a lot of meetings with suppliers down there to see, can we not get cables, components, whatever, right in the country, also to obviously to support business down there. So for now, as you say, either they are donated, bought by NGOs, or there are payment plans which people can follow, which are 2 or 3 years. And I talked to 2 people who were on the payment plan, and for them it worked fine because it was adjusted to, like, it was perfectly adjustable with their monthly income. And still, like, after those years, if you see it in the long term, right, it will save so much money compared to keeping on buying charcoal or firewood.
Sure. Well, and I think back, I mean, here in the United States, where we're spoiled, and we bought our first house 30 years ago, we had to replace our furnace and to heat the house, and we had a 5-year payment plan. And we bought the house so cheap because it's all we could afford, and we had to go on the payment plan. And some people will say, well, gee, are you sure they can manage that for 2 or 3 years? We're doing it for the way we survive here in the States. So I always bring that up. Say it fades into the background as an objection to, you know, this.
Yeah.
And then a statement with a question. One is why this really appeals to me as a great option is being the energy independence, where it's right there in the home. And I have 6 kilowatts of solar panels on my home in Minnesota, and we pay about $20 a year for our entire year for electricity because we're feeding so much back to the grid. And then that's the question then is, are you setting up, say, villages with their own microgrids, or is there any way is that even part of the equation, or are you totally focused on, let's make sure everyone gets this, and then ultimately something like this, as the panels get even more powerful for the same size, I could imagine a whole household or more being powered by these, where you'd have your own microgrid. Is there any plans for that? I've heard of that as something some people are thinking about for places where there is no grid, or the grid is so unreliable that they're setting up the village microgrids on their own. They're totally independent. Where are you in that stage of things?
Yeah, I mean, for now we're selling to individuals or to one family at a time. So one panel provides energy for one cooking unit, or for one home solar system. Sure. Which includes then cooking, lighting, and charging.
Okay.
It is not in the sense of supplying a whole village with one solar panel setup yet. Who knows what will happen?
And for my collection, I mean, is it possible for me to buy one? I mean, I don't want to have one donated to the museum. I try to pay for every cooker I get, because I believe that the people who make them, some of them, it's not, almost none of them rely on it for income, but I feel I really want to make sure that you get the value back, and I'm not taking away from someone who really needs one if someone else wants to buy one. Is that a possibility? Because I could get the panel and hook it up myself. I mean, we got them out the ears here. Is it or what?
I mean, we have plans to supply Stan with one, so I think we might be able to ship just a second one to the US somewhere as well.
We'll figure it out.
We'll work it out. Excellent. On a handshake.
I don't see why that shouldn't work.
And
No,
then
great.
also, just one last question. So if someone doesn't really care about a charitable contribution, but wants to donate to a family in the BD refugee camp, is that
Mhm.
still you welcome or not? It's only to the NGOs?
I think for that you have to actually get in touch with NGOs, just because, as I mentioned earlier, we are not a non-profit and we are not an NGO as such, so we can't receive donations as such. But then again, there are institutions like Gorilla Habitat who can.
Talk to me. I'm Gorilla
There we
Habitat.
go.
I'm an NGO.
Yep, he's the gorilla in the room. As we say.
Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Same here.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Sandy, would you like to start with? Is it like an evolutionary thing, or is it a?
Let's start with the
Start
most,
this one? Okay.
let's start with the most expensive.
Okay.
So it's kind of, to kind of balance things out, you know, one of the questions was asked, well, PV-to and the ECOCA is the ideal solution, but right now the price point is like $500. So when you get to the bottom of the pyramid population where they need to get their 3-stone cook fires replaced, and we estimate that there are 500 million 3-stone cook stoves in operation every day around the globe. Just in perspective, somewhere around 4 billion people do not have access to clean cooking. So, you know, whether you're talking about solar panels or parabolic mirrors or anything else, we have all this technology that can make things better, but now we have to effectively figure out how to get this technology to the people that, you know, really need it.
Sure.
And are using it. So the ECOCA ideal solution with carbon credits and getting some cost reductions, it's going to be a long-term solution. In the meantime, you've got all of these different biomass stoves, and since we're talking solar, many of the biomass stoves need a fan or electricity, what we call converting from what's a basic rocket stove into a gasifier stove. So we get better efficiencies, better combustion, fewer pollutants, less wood required, etc. So the Cadillac on the market is the Mini, M-I-M-I Moto, which is a gasifier stove, and it's called a top loading stove because you actually drop pellets. If you're familiar with the Traeger pellets, this basically uses a less sophisticated Traeger pellet. So it's a combination of a fuel supply where they're converting, whether it's sawdust, agricultural waste, corn crops, anything, into compressing it and producing a pellet configuration, and then using this top loading design to do the cooking. In addition, this is also supplied with a solar panel. So we don't have a solar panel here, but we need electricity to run the fan. So the current model of the Mini Moto, Jill, remember we paid like $150 for this?
Yeah, something like that.
It's roughly $150, and for another 10 or 15 bucks, you get a little solar panel, and it also has USB ports for charging phones, solar lights, etc. And because of the top loading design, the pellets and the fan, this actually, this gets a little complicated, but there's tier 1 through tier 5 performance criteria for cook stoves. And this gets probably the highest efficiencies up in the tier 4.5 or tier 5 performance, which is about as good as you can possibly get in burning biomass. Complexities, you know, it's expensive, and the actual, I just got off a conference call again today, they're talking about how do we figure out production of the pellets, which ideally, if you're using sawdust and wood from purpose supplied farms, you can pretty much eliminate deforestation with this device, but it's still a very complicated process of producing the pellets, getting the fuel out, pay-as-you-go plans for the users and everything else, but, you know, it is moving ahead.
Sure. Now, remind me what the pellets are made of. Is it wood
You can
waste
use,
or?
for example, they have a contract with Southeast Africa Lumber Company in Rwanda, and they get all of their sawdust, waste wood, everything else that they manufacture the pellets in Rwanda from. Other places, they'll talk more about agricultural waste, sugar cane. You got lots of rice husks, coffee residues. It goes on and on and on. There's a tremendous variety of things that you can use for those pellets. But it's still a very, matter of fact, if I had to guess, I would be amazed if there's any more than 20 or 30,000 of this type of stoves in use around the world. So you're not really making a dent on the 500 million we need.
So let me just say two other things. So Lumimoto, like the ECOCA, is based out of the Scandinavian countries. I think this
Sure.
one's the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing was, so it's really like two businesses to start, like they're talking about, they're full with ECOCA, everything, but this also is also two businesses because they're selling the stove and the pellets. You have to use
Sure.
the pellets.
What's the composition? Is stainless steel or aluminum, or what's
I think
the?
this is mostly aluminum.
Yep.
But you can see it's a very nicely formed structure, very heavily insulated. If you look down here, there's insulation
Oh, sure, sure.
all enclosed in there. Because that's another critical part, is if you insulate the cook chamber, you know, you can really, this thing is, you know, this is high end. This has got a little device, you know, you can actually.
Oh, wow.
I never noticed that before. Wow.
So that's,
Very nice. Yes.
so you can actually be, you could be cooking with your big pot. Pick this out, obviously this is gonna be hot, it's gonna have chambers in it, set it down there. And then you reach over and you grab your little pot and drop it in the same hole, and you can continue cooking.
Yeah.
So two different
Nice.
configurations.
So
That's
they,
it.
so they are like the ECOCA. I mean, they do have some distribution in Africa, but as Dan mentioned, it's, you know, it's not going to be 100 million or anything like that.
Well, the guesses are that, you know, there's probably maybe 10,000 of these stoves in service right now, but you need to have at least 100 million.
Sure.
So there's huge gaps existing. And of course, the solar component would be, you know, you can use the solar energy to drive the fan, and it's going to be completely off grid, which is in East Africa, that's primarily what you're dealing with. This is a BioLite design, which again, this gets into the more conventional front-loading system. So the wood is loaded in through this direction, very well insulated, you know, very strong cast iron top, cast iron base, cast iron combustion chamber. Again, this is like $150, isn't it, Jill?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's an expensive device. The unique thing about the BioLite is that it actually uses a thermal electric generating system. So there's a TEG device in here that takes the heat, it's kind of hard to see, but down on their side, you've got the hot side of the TEG, cold side out here with the fan, and that thermal difference causes electricity to be generated, which will run the fan. And on this side, you can see you also have a USB port for charging phones or lights.
Sure.
So once again, if you have grid electricity, you know, you can use that to run these fans. And obviously, if you have grid electricity, you've already got charging for your phone, you've got charging for lights, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
But again, we're dealing in communities, areas where there's just absolutely no electricity, or extremely unreliable, Or if you talk about electric cooking, it's expensive, very expensive. So it's not, we think about electric cooking as a small part
Yeah.
of our electric bill, but over there, it would be like probably
massive.
twice their monthly income would be going to electricity for cooking. So it's not something that isn't a viable option for them. So you've got to look at some biomass, wood, charcoal, pellets, some form of biomass is going to be a major part of the cooking equation for the next 20 or 30 years. There is no viable option. So what we have to do is we have to look at a very sophisticated pellet design, some methods of gasifier stoves. And this is most dear to Jill's heart because these are Greenway appliances, stoves out of India. So Greenway manufactures a basic rocket stove, but then they also manufacture these designs which have they do manufacture gasifier stoves too, right?
No.
Fans?
No.
Oh, okay, I'm learning something here today too.
So they sell 100,000 of these stoves, a year, so they do have a market down there.
Well, they have a big market, so they're one of the larger stove manufacturers in the world.
In India.
In India. I'd say in terms of rocket stoves, they're right up there. I mean, in terms of, they'd be equivalent to Burn in terms of volume. Probably the only large one I know is Chengzhou Stove
Right.
Manufacturing out of China,
Right, yeah.
where they manufacture 100,000 a month or something. It's over $1 million a year
Right,
easily.
Right.
But these devices here, Jill has been looking and working with San Diego State University here locally. Jill is High Z Technology, which is a TEG manufacturer. How many TEGs have you got in space right now? There's a good question.
Well, it's actually using lead telluride. We just have just a few. I mean, you only need a few modules in each Voyager, so you don't really need a whole lot, so.
Yeah. But again, they've been a large part of the program for many, many years. And so they're looking at, can we take the TEG, combine it with a fan, various types of devices to get better flow distribution inside the chamber and get up to similar efficiencies to what you have with these basic stoves. So right now they're doing testing here. They've actually got a test facility out in back where they're doing burn tests and evaluating all these different stove designs with the objective of, if you can develop the right design and get the cost in the right region, they're going to be able to increase their market share in East Africa and India as well.
In other places.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a no-brainer that obviously we can use solar. It's much cleaner, but, is that reality?
Yeah, no, it is. But again, the reality is, as I said earlier, you've got all of these stoves, parabolic mirrors, ECOCAs, fancy stoves, basic stoves, rocket stoves, mud stoves. Everything is going to be a part of the equation because it's amazing. And again, the podcast I was watching this morning from the Clean Cooking Alliance, the total commitment needed globally for solving what is called SDG 7, which is the United Nations Strategic Development Goal number 7, which is affordable energy and cooking for all households around the world. The number needed is $4.5 billion. And the annual spending so far ranges between 115 and 120 $1 million.
Jeff Bezos, you can afford it. Do it.
So your comment earlier about my buddy Bill Gates or my buddy Elon Musk.
Yeah, or Jeff Bezos, let's see, how many
billions have you guys got? And rather than spending it on a joyride into space, why don't you help 200 million people get out of poverty and escape the noxious fumes that are coming out of their cook stove?
Let's find something that works in quantity and, to really distribute as widely as possible. It doesn't have to be in a mana range. We know that. So that's another reason this sort of thing appeals to me, is it's the base level that you have to start from. And then if they want to expand later, like I'm thinking the ECOCA, if the family says, well, I can sure use 2 of these because I got a big family. Well, okay, you know, work it out.
No, it's very, again, it's a fascinating field. And again, I should interject, and you get this in the film someplace. I got into this because after seeing the gorillas, looking at the limited habitat that they have, and looking at the villagers sitting there burning the wood from the habitat, or wherever they could get wood, I walked away and I said,
You put 2 and 2 together.
how am I gonna protect the gorilla habitat? Which is why I started a gorilla habitat NGO. And it finally boiled down to, I've got to stop, them burning down the habitat.
Yeah.
And I've got to figure out how I can regenerate the habitat, link the habitats, and build a stronger community for the gorillas, which involves, if you can't solve the problem of all these villagers surrounding this habitat, you cannot guarantee the long-term viability of the mountain gorillas.
At least-
And there's only there's 1060 left in the world right now.
Yeah. So at least halt the incursion of quote unquote civilization.
And they're doing a lot of good things.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good things being done, but this all led me back to this complex cooking situation, because I'm amazed right now, and I'm working right now with the Clean Cooking Alliance, and I'm saying, guys, you got all these piecemeal things going on. Just grab a hold of Gates, or my buddy Elon, or Bezos, or IKEA, or some of these airlines that need carbon offsets, and say, hey, put up $1 billion, $2 billion loan guarantee for these companies, public companies, profitable companies, and let them grow from 100,000 stoves to 1 million stoves. And you can solve the problem in 10 years. 10 years, the problem's gone. Other problems, carbon sequestration, replacing carbon or coal-fired power plant, airplane fuel pollution, on and on and on. They are complex, difficult, no technology solutions.
They got a longer timeline to
For
reduce
this,
and eliminate than
this
this.
is so
Yeah.
basic that it's a no-brainer. So I'm passionate about this at least.
I appreciate that, and that is staying in, because the motivation behind people's designing stoves, figuring out how to promote solar cooking, this kind of, off the grid cooking, that's huge. And then also, what part of the series is every episode is a little bit of a surprise, because I hadn't heard that before. I kind of gathered it from your from your website, but to say it explicitly is great. So knowing the motivation behind is just so critical.
That's great.
Yeah, and that's huge. It's not just the gorillas, of course, right? How many different?
Yeah, we expanded it out to, right now my focus is the national parks in sub-Saharan Africa, because all of the national parks, where it's lions, rhinos, forest elephants, chimpanzees,
Right.
llamas,
Yeah.
ground gorillas, lowland gorillas, it's all an interlinked problem that has to be solved. So it's a good journey.
Well, one of the radio programs I heard on public radio was about a tree that's only in Brazil or Paraguay or something that is critical for certain vaccines. Because it's got some component that just helps generate the immune response.
Yeah.
And so there's this guy that's saying they were taking down whole trees and then stripping the bark to get the stuff. And he said, no, just grow a field of them, and the saplings, you could take 10, 20 at a time, you get the same as that tree, but then and you're not destroying a tree that's going to make all these other saplings. And so again, it's the fast, cheap, and electronic, just the little tiny solution,
Great.
times 10, times 100. So
Good.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. This is
Enjoyed it.
fantastic.
Jill.
Yes,
Yeah,
thanks,
no
Jill.
problem. No problem. No problem at all.